is one of our culture's most cherished values. I think it speaks of a deeper belief that we hold, that is, that all people are valuable, that they're all worthy, that all people are worthy of certain rights just by virtue of being human. And so, universities want to broaden the diversity of their teaching staff, rightly so, or advertisers want to show you the diversity of the people who like their products, or workplaces have mandatory workplace objectives, mine does. But where does this commitment to diversity come from? It's not something, after all, that springs from our biology. When looking at the human body, you don't see a heart here, lung here, and human rights over there. So where does it come from? Author of the best-selling book Sapiens, which charts the history of humanity, agrees with this. He says when he's speaking about human rights, there are no such rights in biology. Different people have, at different times, been considered less worthy or less valuable or not valuable at all. One such group in Roman society was babies, particularly female babies. In fact, it wouldn't be unusual to hear crying from rubbish heaps as babies had been discarded there. Unimaginable to us because things have changed so much. And one of the reasons that it has changed is because of the person of Jesus and his followers. It was his teachings that made people like Macrina, a Roman woman, go around the rubbish tips and pick up babies and care for them like they were her own. She believed the Christian teaching that all people were made in the image of God. Human rights flows right out of that sort of teaching, doesn't it? All people are valuable because they're made in God's image. She saw something of the divine in these frail little babies. And so far from being an enemy of diversity, I think Christianity gives us the foundations for a commitment to diversity. But more than that, it also shows us the God who not only is kind to those who are different and asks his followers to do the same, but who is willing to die on behalf of his enemies. Not just people who are different to him, but his enemies. Isn't that a next level commitment to diversity? After all, we all find diversity hard, don't we? And yet Jesus shows us a God who so loves his enemies he's willing to die for them. Christianity not only gives us the foundations then for commitment to diversity, but also the means through which we can experience it and enjoy it. If that were true, then you would expect Christianity to be one of the most diverse social movements of all of history, wouldn't you? And after all, Christianity is the story of a carpenter from Palestine whose first followers spread throughout the Middle East, along North Africa and up through Europe. We might think of Christianity as historically a Western thing, but I think that's quite a blinkered view. It's also culturally blinkered today to think of it as a white and Western religion. After all, around the world, most people who are Christians today don't fit into that demographic. Historian from Yale University, Lamin Sanneh, who died last year, a Gambian man, he wrote that there are more people praying and worshipping in more languages today in Christianity than in any other religion in the world. That's true actually of any other worldview. Language is a really important part of our expression of our cultural diversity, isn't it? And you might argue that Christianity has such a diversity of followers because of Western cultural imperialism. But I think there's two problems with that argument. The first is I think it credits Western missionaries with too much. In places where the church is growing exponentially today, it's actually where the impact of Western influences is on the decrease, not the increase. Lamin Sanneh makes that point. He says that actually it's crediting Western missionaries with far too much if you think that the huge growth of the church in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, is from Western missionaries. He credits indigenous church leaders with that. But secondly, I don't think that argument stacks up because cultural imperialism tends to squash cultures, not to celebrate them. And it's fascinating, isn't it, that many languages around the world today are actually codified for the first time as people are written down for the first time as people become Christians. I think that's just one small example of a commitment to diversity, of cultural diversity that is enjoyed through Christianity. And I think you see that in the church locally as well. When I finished university, my first graduate job was in a church. There were two other guys doing my job. One was a used car salesman and one was a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. That church community was far more diverse than the community I had at university, or a community I have in my neighbourhood, or now the community I have in my workplace. It was very normal for me to hear 3 or 4 different languages being spoken in that church building. But again, not just people who are different getting on, but rather people who really should be enemies, loving one another, gathering around the Lord Jesus, and finding forgiveness in one another because of the forgiveness that they found in Jesus. You would see prostitutes sitting next to policemen, or asylum seekers sitting next to immigration officials, people who really should be enemies, and yet who were brought together because of the love that Jesus showed for them. And so again, far from being an enemy of diversity, I think Christianity gives us the foundations for it, the means through which to enjoy it. And so if you put your nose in a church, I think you'll see something of that. I also think you'll see that if you put your nose in the Bible, from start to finish. You'll see a God who has woven diversity into his design for humanity, and also come to earth in Jesus to die for us so that we can enjoy something of that diversity together. The last book of the Bible has a beautiful picture of people from all nations, speaking all languages, all worshipping Jesus for his incomparable worth. Christianity isn't an enemy of diversity. It gives us the foundations for it, but also the means through which we can enjoy it.